Solus Prime, the prime built to defeat Unicron. Solus Prime is one of the 13 primes that were created by Primus in their fight against the evil entity that was Unicron. The 13 were a group of legendary beings who were said to have created Cybertron and the Transformer race. She is the only female member of the 13, and her specialty is forging weapons and artifacts. These creations were so powerful that they could alter reality altogether irrespective of the wielder. In the Transformers lore, Solus Prime is revered as a skilled craftsman and warrior, with her forging abilities being highly sought after by every other prime. Her most famous creation is the Star Saber, a powerful weapon that has been wielded by many characters throughout the Transformers series, most notably Prima. Solus Prime's physical appearance varies depending on the continuity, but she is often depicted as a tall, elegant-looking Transformer with a distinctive helmet and a staff. She is usually portrayed as a wise and powerful figure who is respected by all who know her. In this video, we will explore everything you need to know about Solus Prime and her actions throughout the timeline. We will explore her history, her alternate continuity, and her powers and creations. So let us not waste any more time and get on with the history of Solus Prime.
Hello there, everybody! Before we get into our list, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel and clicking the little bell icon up in the corner to get notifications. This is a small click for you, but means a lot to us. Thank you, and let's begin.
A brief history of Solus Prime. Solus Prime was part of the 13 primes created by Primus in their fight against the Chaos Bringer, Unicron. Right from the dawn of her creation, Solus was unique in many ways. As the 4th prime of the dynasty of primes, Solus was considered to be the architect, the creator, and the builder of the 13. Before an all-out war with Unicron, the primes sought different approaches and strategized on their own terms on how to defeat the monstrous entity. During this time, Solus remained free of any bonds and chose not to take any sides. That did not mean she was out for the training and planning phase, though because she decided to bring her inputs to light with a different approach. She actively made sure that the others train in the best ways possible. For that, she created a holosuite that could create a virtual copy of their enemy, Unicron. Through this creation, the primes were able to train against a well-gauged-out hologram of Unicron with the understanding of his abilities. Through this mechanism, the primes were able to understand how far ahead Unicron is in terms of power and how hand-to-hand combat should be out of the question. During the preparation phase of the battle, Solus Prime also became acquainted with Megatronus rather well. Megatronus was always a questionable character for the other primes, but Solus saw something much nobler in him. After befriending him, Solus created the first batch of Dark Energon-activated suits for him. At Megatronus's behest and constant urging, Solus also created the Requiem Blaster. The weapon was considered to be one of the strongest creations ever. Solus herself thought of the blaster to be unstoppable. Nonetheless, even after countless discussions and arguments among the 13 regarding such a powerful weapon and its wielder, Solus put her trust in Megatronus and defeated him from the doubtful eyes of the others. She thought him capable of wielding the powerful weapon, as she believed that he was best suited to do that because he constantly fights his inner demons and still comes out on top. While Solus delivered her speech on behalf of Megatronus, he was filled with a feeling of pride and appreciation towards her. Following this argument between the primes, Solus continued creating new powerful weapons and armor for the 13. She made sure to create weapons that would work well in unison with the existing powers of the members of the 13. Furthermore, Solus also created a supercomputer-esque program that would allow them to predict all of the possible moves of Unicron during their battle, giving them the edge regarding intel. On the day of the battle, as all the primes followed the plans they had orchestrated to defeat Unicron, Solus was the first to grace the battlefield with her presence through Vector Prime's space bridge. Armed with her trusty sword and her forge, Solus proved to be one of the quintessential members during the battle. Her creations, her powers, and her leadership qualities were of much importance in their triumphant battle against the monster. Returning to Cybertron with the victory at hand, the 13 were unaware of the effects that Unicron's darkness has had on them. They were in the shadow of how susceptible they were to his evil energy and how it has changed them. The following age saw Solus continuing to create essential weaponry, armor, and items at her forge that would help the primes and their booming communities of a growing civilization. During this time, the bond between Solus and Megatronus grew stronger with every day's passing. The downfall of the 13 started showing its signs of initiation when Liege Maximo requested Solus to create a piece of armor. Solus refused her services to Liege because he explained the farm of of robotic creatures that he was trying to build. Solus was against his plans, but when Leech presented her a gift as a peace offering, one of the robotic creatures that he was creating, Solus accepted. After a lot of urging from Maximo, Solus gave in and constructed the suit of armor he so dearly wanted. When Primo orchestrated a meeting and subsequent voting for the farm in question, Solus voted against allowing them to continue their practices as she believed it was unethical. Although they were on the same side of the argument, Solus remarked on Prima's obvious vilification towards Megatronus. Before this, Solus had completed the armor she was preparing for Maximo, but she never told Maximo of its completion and chose to keep it hidden. It was revealed that through the gifted robotic creature, Maximo was able to maintain surveillance on Solus, and he was aware of the progress of the project. Megatronus agreed with Solus's actions and believed she could not have made the armor for Maximo. As the argument started heating up, Megatronus destroyed Solus's pet. As the fight ensued, Megatronus used the Requiem blaster without much thought and inadvertently killed Solus Prime. In her final words, Solus confessed her feelings for Megatronus and what he meant for her. Upon her passing, Solus's body made its way to the core of Cybertron and to Primus in the supposed afterlife. Solus's death also resulted in the creation of the Well of All Sparks. After all the chaos ended, the Primes that survived the onslaught prepared a tomb as a sign of respect and admiration for her. At the tomb, the Primes also held a funeral for their fallen member who had left her mark on everyone's life through her actions. After the dawn of the Cybertronian civilization, 1/13 of the Cybertronians called themselves descendants of Solus Prime as they believed their neutral structure was exactly like or similar to hers.
Creating the 13, the original primes who preceded me.
The brief role of Solus Prime in the cartoon series. As one of the most important primes in the Covenant of Primus, Solus Prime surprisingly did not get that much of a mention in the Prime cartoon continuity. There were, however, 3 instances in 3 different episodes where there was a brief mention of Solus and her creations. The first mention came from episode 24 of Season 1, titled One Shall Rise, Part 1. In this episode, the Autobots are on a journey to the Earth's core for knowledge, and they are able to discover that the dark energon that is present around the planet can be responsible for natural disasters at massive proportions. The episode sheds light on and is the first mention of the Primes in the cartoon series. It tells us about the folklore surrounding the 13 that is known as the Cybertronians. We get to know about the battle that had been raging on for aeons between Primus and Unicron. It was said that neither of these two was ever able to gain the upper hand and stayed in a stalemate until Primus created the 13. The 13 were created to come together and defeat Unicron, which they eventually were successful in doing. Solus Prime is then mentioned in episode 26 of Season 1, titled One Shall Rise, Part 3. This was the continuation of the previous story, and the audience learned a whole lot about Optimus's history while the battle at Earth's core continued. We learned that the Cybertronians had raised statues of the 13 as a sign of respect for their heroism. These statues were placed in the High Council chamber, and we get to see Solus Prime's statue there too. The third mention of Solus Prime comes from a story from Season 2 titled Operation Bumblebee, Part 2, Episode 5. In the story, Bumblebee stumbles upon some important information regarding the works of Starscream and Mech. Meanwhile, we also learn about Ratchet's past life and involvement. We get to know the whereabouts of the essential artifact related to Solus Prime, her forge. Through the use of this forge, Solus had created some of the strongest weapons and armor ever to exist. Her forge was supposedly sealed inside the vaults of Lachan until it was dispatched by Alpha Trion to Earth. On Earth, Optimus Prime and the other Autobots in his ranks used the forge for their mission. Exploring the IDW comic book continuity of Solus Prime. In the era that followed after the withdrawal of the Knights of Cybertron, the Primes reigned heavily on the growing Cybertronian civilization. They led their people towards signs of development and ensured their successful survival. Solus Prime was also active during this age, and she gained a certain amount of following from Cybertronians who believed in her ideals, principles, and morals. From the current timeline, approximately 12 million years ago, Solus befriended the other Primes, and the cult-like following that each Prime had become a massive coalition between the groups with like-minded ideals. These Primes were Vector, Nexus, Alchemist, and Alpha Trion. They all believed in maintaining peace and tranquility, and hence they started working together for their collective growth as a civilization. Eventually, they became the founding members of a settlement that came to become Crystal City in the current generation. Later, Solus was approached by Vector, Liege Maximo, and Onyx Prime to join forces with them in stopping the onslaught of Megatronus and his armies on the city of Protohex. Solus joined the battle after the death of Septimus Prime and was determined to stop Megatronus's madness. In the following battle, Onyx Prime was reigning supreme over Megatronus's armies, but eventually they called a truce after the revival of the three Titans from the ground. With the truce established, the 8 Primes joined forces, and later Prima joined the Alliance too with his northern allies. Over the period of the next couple of million years, the Primes were unstoppable and ruled magnanimously over Cybertron. With this alliance, the relationship between Solus and Megatronus grew tenfold. During this time, the creativity of Solus was endless, and she continued creating powerful and effective items and weaponry. Everything that she created during this time came to be known as the Artifacts of the Primes. Solus also met her Titan follower named Canimus. Due to their superiority over every other being on Cybertron and the myths of their likely omnipotence, some of the Primes had become quite arrogant during this time. They started to believe that their powers were far greater than anyone who could challenge them. Even the false myth that only a Prime could kill another Prime was something they started to believe themselves. This was exactly what led to their eventual downfall, and it all started during this era. In actuality, all of the myths and the coalitions and subsequent alliances were all the machinations of a time-traveling Shockwave, who had disguised himself as Onyx Prime to reshape history as he pleased. Shockwave came from a time when the Cybertronian civilization had fallen and failed. The Primes did not possess the knowledge of Onyx's false existence. During this time, Solus created one of the most powerful swords ever seen in the universe, imbued with the power of the Matrix of Leadership. The sword was dubbed the Star Saber and was made for Prima to use. During a mission, as the Primes failed to complete their objectives, Prima blamed Megatronus for his incompetency. Megatronus attempted to plead to Solus and explain how he was not in the wrong, but Solus was not entertaining him and rejected his advances. She established that Megatronus's actions were short-sighted and faulty, as the Primes were supposed to use their gifts for the betterment of their civilization and the protection of others, and not follow a path of destruction that was followed by discriminatory means. Following this betrayal of sorts, Megatronus saw himself more aligned with Liege Maximo. The two then orchestrated an assault on the leadership of Prima. When the two started acting out their plan, their schemes were revealed by the other Primes who stood in to protect Prima. During this battle, Solus sacrificed her life for the protection of Prima. Solus was killed by none other than Megatronus, a former friend, by a creation of her own, the Star Saber. Following this treachery, the first Cybertronian civil war was initiated, and no one knew of the true perpetrator, Onyx Prime. After the death of Solus Prime, her Titan follower, Caminus, fled off to a distant moon and found a Transformer civilization that would later develop into a colony of denizens religiously inclined towards the way of the flame. This religion was based on the teachings, ideals, morals, and actions of Solus Prime. The civilization was termed the Camians and the Moon Camius. They believed the original 13 were gods, and Solus was the greatest among them. They also believed that Solus contributed the most to the pantheon, and that every Camian spark contained a piece of Solus's everlasting essence. They also believed that all of the Camian spark returned to Solus's forge upon death, and their rebirth is her doing in Cybertron. There was also a religiously inclined organization that went by the name the Torchbearers, and they perceived themselves as servants of the fallen Solus. Solus Prime and her romantic inclinations. As one of the only female Transformers known to exist during that time, and factually, the only female Prime in existence, you can be sure that Solus's heart went into any direction that she pleased. Over the span of the millions of years that she lived, her romantic inclinations were always on display. One of the most revered relationships that Solus was ever committed to was with Megatronus. Megatronus, now known as the Fallen One, was considered to be a villainous Prime by the other members of the 13. If not villainous, they at least considered him a problem and always sought to control his powers before they ripened and were used against them. But unlike all of them, Solus believed that there was something far greater inside Megatronus than what everyone was led to believe. She believed that Megatronus was one of the strongest-willed Primes of them all, and he constantly battled against his inner demons and still did what was right. Their relationship grew to be stronger every time the other Primes shunned Megatronus while Solus remained at his side. In the Prime Wars trilogy cartoons, the relationship between Solus and Megatronus was explored further. Since the death of Solus in that continuity came at the hands of Megatronus using one of their creations, the Requiem Blaster, to inadvertently kill her after an argument, Megatronus devoted his life to figuring out a way with which he could revive Solus and be together with his lover once again. In pursuit of happiness, Megatronus committed a plethora of atrocities to ensure that Solus lived again. When Megatronus was successful in bringing her back through unfair means, the horror that Solus was greeted with was too much for her gentle heart to bear. She resorted to the last way of stopping Megatronus, which was to use all her powers and ensure that they both die in the following explosion of energy. Their relationship ended with both of them dying and Solus being revived only to kill herself right after, along with Megatronus. Still, a better love story than Twilight, we suppose. Apart from Megatronus, Solus was also involved with other members of the dynasty of Prime, most notably Nexus Prime, Onyx Prime, and Micronus Prime. Her bond with these members came through because of their shared love for creation and matching ideals. Although they were mostly only close friends, sometimes the writers would hint towards something greater between them. When you live for millions of years and are tasked with leading a growing civilization, some partnership could not harm anyone, right? What makes Solus Prime so powerful? Solus Prime was among the strongest of the Primes. This was not due to the fact that she was the strongest at physical combat, rather far from it. She was one of the strongest because she was able to create the most powerful weapons and objects ever known to exist in the universe. Solus created weapons that defied every universal law in existence. Her creations were strong enough to go toe-to-toe with Unicron, even if the bearer was not. Her creations consisted of the following. 1. Star Saber. This sword was one of the most powerful artifacts ever created by Solus, wielded by Prima and imbued with the power of the Matrix of Leadership. This sword provides its holder with unfathomable amounts of power. This sword possessed the power to destroy entire solar systems if used as a weapon of destruction. The single planet could instantly turn to dust if the user was not weary of this sword's powers. 2. Requiem Blaster, the weapon that caused Solus's death in 2 continuities at the hands of her lover, Megatronus. The Requiem Blaster draws its powers from a supernova's thermal energy, a black hole's gravity, or a quasar's sound waves. This weapon was able to deal heavy damage to Unicron and was wielded by Megatronus. No living being apart from Unicron has ever been the target of this blaster and lived to tell the tale. 3. Chimera Stone, the artifact of Microconus Prime's choice. The Chimera Stone was capable of supplying massive amounts of energy to its targets as per the will of Micronus. It could also channel the energy from one prime to another. It was like a living battery with an endless supply. 4. Apex Armor. The Apex Armor would allow its bearer to be nearly impervious to any form of attack. This suit of armor, when engaged, can make the wearer nearly impossible to damage. It also enhances the user's strength, and it can also be used by humans. 5. Infinite Combinatoric. Although it is not clear what the artifact can do, it is clear that it can do it infinitely. It is still considered one of the strongest relics to ever exist in the Transformers universe. 6. Chaos Edge. The weapon of choice for Nexus Prime, Chaos Edge was another sword forged by Solus with unbelievable powers. 7. Cyber Caliber. Nexus Prime was the wielder of another artifact known as Cyber Caliber. This was also a sword forged by Solus and could fragment itself or other weapons into 5 different components to be used separately or together. 8. Quill. One of the strongest items to ever exist, the quill was basically a pen-like structured item that can alter the timeline and change the future of the universe when used. When used together with the Covenant of Primus, the quill can write new events that would otherwise not occur in the future. 9. Zeonomicon. The Zeonomicon was the source of Logos Prime's powers in all its greatness. 10. Terminus Blade. The blade that has the power to move worlds. Terminus Blade is one of the stronger weapons created by Solus right after the Star Saber and Requiem Blaster. It can shatter the entire universe's dimensional reality and leave everlasting effects. 11. Enigma of Combination. Another artifact owned by Nexus Prime, it has the power to impart one of the greatest skills known to Cybertronians, that of combination, as well as nurture the unification and collaboration of the minds of sentient beings in its vicinity. It is safe to say that the creator of the most devastatingly powerful artifacts is a danger to society themselves if they lose their mind. That is why Solus Prime is among the strongest of the Primes, and her creations are still feared in the universe. The words of Robert Overheimer, "Now I become death, the destroyer of worlds," are directly applicable to Solus Prime, but instead of worlds, make it universes. Conclusion. Solus Prime, the first known artisan, left an indelible mark on the Transformers universe through her creations and legacy. Her mastery of the Forge, a legendary crafting tool, resulted in the creation of numerous powerful weapons and artifacts. Beyond her physical creations, Solus Prime's philosophy and teachings on the importance of creativity and individuality continue to inspire generations of Transformers. Her legacy also lives on through her descendants, who continue to carry on her mission of protecting the universe from threats and promoting peace and unity. Ultimately, Solus Prime's existence and creations have had a lasting and profound impact on the Transformers universe, shaping its history and influencing the actions of Transformers to this day.
This is all the time we had for today's episode. We hope you guys liked it. So it would be awesome if you guys could take some time to subscribe to our channel. Also, push that bell icon so you get notifications whenever we post a new video. And don't forget to tell us which topics you want us to cover in the comments section. And stay safe.